Right.
So what was, all right, so let's move to the sort of the third part of the book, because, Barack Obama is a big turning point, but it's funny, like just when we were talking about the ethno-nationalism that was deployed against Southern Europeans in the first part of the 20th century, we're 36 hours or 24 hours away from J.D. Vance talking about how, just as an example, when ethnics get together in enclaves, you get crime.
Right.
Like he's talking about gangs of New York.
That's
like,
right.
Literally just sort of, I guess, to just sort of prove your point on how these sort of myths are deployed.
Yeah.
But what was that drift about? Because in the wake of World War II, we have this myth of the platoon, which implies that like everybody's, we're all Americans and we're all on board. And even through the Reagan years, I just saw a clip of Reagan saying like, America's the only place where you can come from anywhere and become an American. You can't do that. You can't go to Japan and become a Japanese person, and you can't go to France and become French. What happens over that time? Because there's a certain durability, as you're right, like it gets combined with the New Deal, and there's a certain durability to that through at least, the mid 60s. While we have this great compression where there's literally less income inequality than any other period in our country's history. Right. Where does this drift? Where does it go? Is it a certain insecurity that is associated with white people becoming supposedly not the majority, the so-called majority? Is it the loss of jobs that comes with like sort of, globalism? What begins to sort of like put us into this new, what you call MAGA era?
Yeah, that's a really complicated question. Let me take it from a mythological point of view. Let's just assume, for the sake of the discussion, that this liberal social order was connected with the myth of the good war. So if you abuse the myth of the good war, if you get us into bad wars, you discredit not only the warfighting part of it, you discredit everything that the warfighting part brought with it. And I think that's one of the things that happened, that Vietnam really did a job on this country. And the attempts in the 90s of the Bush administration, the two Bush administrations really, to recover from what they called Vietnam syndrome, got us into wars that turned out to be bad wars, pointless wars, costly wars. And wars that, at least in the case of Iraq, were based on falsehood. It was charitably bad intelligence, but perhaps false intelligence. So the idea that fool me once, shame on me; fool me twice, fool me three times, get me into three bad wars, and maybe I think that that we shouldn't get into wars at all. And so you get the part of MAGA, which has been characterized as isolationist, goes with that. Now, I think that there is also, in addition to that, a cultural reaction against the racial liberalism and the sexual liberalism that we associate with the 1960s, 1970s. That there's a reaction against that. It coalesces around when Obama is president. But it's definitely present in the society before that. You see that in Reagan, in the Reagan years. You see it most emphatically in Pat Buchanan's declaration of culture war in the 1992 presidential primary campaign. And that really has become the focus of the cultural agenda of the MAGA movement, is the reaction against those the racial and gender liberation. Now, the racial part is a concern about a loss of social power by whites. And the gender and sexual part is about the loss of moral authority, the right to say what is good and what is bad, what is permitted and what is not permitted. If you lose that, that's a real loss. If you thought you had that authority and it's been taken away from you, that is a real loss. That's going to hit you. And that's, I think, why we're experiencing the power of that snapback against those liberating movements.
Longtime listeners of this program will remember back in 2016, 2017, there was an ongoing argument on this program about that loss of social relevance, and known as the zero-sum wars here on our program. But the idea, I mean, I would explain it as like when I was a kid growing up in the 70s and the 80s, there was nothing I could see in our culture that was not essentially centering me as a white kid. Like the commercials were focused on my mother, but my mother doing stuff for me or future me as dad.
Yes.
The TV shows, whatever it was, they were all from essentially either my perspective as a kid or my perspective as I grow through the years, but nobody else's.
Right.
And that changes, and it creates a certain anxiety, I guess, on some level.
And exploited by the Breitbarts of the world, right? Where they meld the kind of cultural anxiety and that what Sam is describing there, and put it into a political context of culture being, politics being downstream from culture too. That backlash to Hollywood and to art or popular culture moving past what you describe, Richard.
Yes. Well, we're getting here. You think about, we're talking about mass media. And the cultural function of mass media, which is to give us an image of ourselves. When the media change that image in a radical way, it makes a real difference. I'm thinking about when I was in graduate school in the early '60s. I remember when a black person came on in an advertisement, we would call, my wife and I would call each other in from the other room, come and look and see, because it was such an extraordinary thing to occur. It's not at all extraordinary now. It's the norm. You can even see interracial couples normalized as the people who buy rugs, the people who have homeowners insurance. And that to people who are, I would say, any older than 40, there's a big difference there. That's really and truly changed, and you feel it.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.